The morning fog rolled thick over Coronado Island as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stood at attention outside the Naval Special Warfare Command building. At 32 years old, she had spent the last decade proving herself in a world that didn't want her there. Her uniform was crisp, her posture perfect, but inside her chest, her heart hammered with anticipation. Today was different. Today, she would begin the most grueling phase of her career, a specialized training program with an elite SEAL unit. She was the first woman ever selected for this particular assignment, and she knew exactly what that meant. Every eye would be on her. Every mistake would be magnified. Every success would be dismissed as luck. Commander Jack Reynolds emerged from the building, flanked by 4 other instructors. He was a mountain of a man with a weathered face and cold gray eyes that swept over Sarah with obvious disdain. She had heard the stories about Reynolds. He was old school, a warrior from a different era who believed women had no place in combat operations. "So you're Mitchell," Reynolds said, his voice like gravel. He didn't salute. He didn't extend his hand. He simply looked her up and down as if she were something unpleasant he'd found on his boot. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "Let me make something clear," Reynolds continued, stepping closer. "I didn't approve this, I don't believe in it, and I sure as hell don't think you can handle what we do here." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But orders are orders, so we're going to put you through the program, and when you fail, and you will fail, at least we can say we gave you a fair shot." Sarah held his gaze. She had heard variations of this speech her entire military career. "I'm ready, sir." Reynolds snorted. "Ready? You don't even know what that word means." He turned to the other instructors. "Gentlemen, meet our newest trainee. Let's show her what she signed up for." The other instructors didn't speak, but Sarah could see the skepticism written on their faces. One of them, a younger man with a scarred eyebrow, actually shook his head and walked away. The message was clear. She wasn't welcome here. The first week was designed to break her. The physical training was relentless. 20-mile runs carrying 60-pound packs, ocean swims in freezing water, obstacle courses that left her hands bloody and raw. But Sarah had expected that. She had trained for years to build the strength and endurance needed for this moment. What she hadn't fully prepared for was the isolation. The other trainees, all men, kept their distance. They didn't speak to her in the mess hall. They didn't acknowledge her during briefings. It was as if she were invisible or worse, contaminated. Reynolds made it worse. He questioned every decision she made during tactical exercises. When she succeeded at a task, he found reasons to criticize her technique. When she struggled, he made sure everyone noticed. His favorite phrase became, "Is that the best you can do, Mitchell? Because it's not good enough." One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, tending to the blisters on her feet. Her body ached in ways she hadn't thought possible, but it wasn't the physical pain that bothered her most. It was the constant weight of proving herself to men who had already decided she would fail. There was a knock on her door. Sarah opened it to find Lieutenant Maria Vasquez, a Navy pilot who worked on the base. Maria was one of the few women in senior positions at Coronado, and she had reached out to Sarah during her first week. "You look like hell," Maria said, but her voice was kind. "Feel like it too," Sarah admitted. Maria stepped inside and closed the door. "Listen, I know what Reynolds is doing. He's done it before, not to women because you're the first to get this far, but to anyone he decides doesn't belong. He breaks them down psychologically, makes them doubt themselves until they quit." "I'm not going to quit," Sarah said firmly. "I know you're not. That's why I'm here." Maria sat down on the edge of the bed. "He's going to escalate. Men like Reynolds don't just want you to fail. They want to humiliate you so badly that no other woman will dare follow in your footsteps. You need to be ready for whatever he throws at you next." Sarah nodded slowly. "What do you think he'll do?" Maria's expression darkened. "I don't know exactly, but I know it'll be soon and it'll be designed to make you look weak in front of everyone, Just remember, you're stronger than he thinks. You're stronger than any of them think." After Maria left, Sarah stood at her window, looking out at the dark ocean. The waves crashed against the shore with relentless force, never stopping, never giving up. She thought about all the women who had fought for her to have this opportunity. She thought about the girls who would come after her, who would need to see that it was possible. The escalation came 2 weeks later, during what was supposed to be a routine mountain training exercise. The team had been transported to a rugged area in the Cleveland National Forest, about 2 hours from Coronado. The terrain was unforgiving: steep cliffs, loose rock, and dense brush that tore at exposed skin. The exercise was designed to test navigation skills, endurance, and the ability to work as a team under extreme conditions. Sarah had performed well throughout the morning. She had kept pace with the men, successfully completed every checkpoint, and even helped one trainee who had twisted his ankle navigate a particularly difficult section. For a brief moment, she had allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to earn their respect. That hope died when they reached Devil's Drop. Devil's Drop was a cliff face that rose about 40 feet above a rocky slope. The official exercise didn't require them to go near it. Their checkpoint was several hundred yards to the east, but Reynolds ordered everyone to the edge. "Gather up," he commanded, his voice echoing off the rocks. The trainees formed a semicircle near the cliff's edge. Sarah positioned herself among them, her instincts already whispering warnings. Something was wrong. Reynolds had a look in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a cold calculation that made her skin prickle. "Mitchell front and center," Reynolds barked. Sarah stepped forward, her boots sending small stones skittering over the edge. She could hear them bouncing down the slope below, the sound fading as they fell. "Tell me, Mitchell," Reynolds said, his voice deceptively casual. "What's the #1 rule of special operations?" "Never leave a man behind, sir," Sarah answered. "Wrong," Reynolds smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The #1 rule is trust. Your teammates have to trust you with their lives. And right now, I don't see how anyone here could trust someone who's been given special treatment, who's been handed opportunities instead of earning them." Sarah's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, I've earned everything I have." "Have you?" Reynolds stepped closer. "Or are you just a political statement, a checkbox on some bureaucrat's diversity chart?" The other trainees shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed to sense that Reynolds was crossing a line, but no one spoke up. No one challenged him. "I think we need to test that trust," Reynolds continued. "I think we need to see if you're really one of us, or if you're just playing dress-up in a uniform." Before Sarah could respond, Reynolds nodded to two of the instructors. They moved quickly, professionally, grabbing Sarah by the arms. She immediately went into defensive mode, but they were ready for that. Within seconds, they had pulled her to the very edge of the cliff. "What are you doing?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp but controlled. "Testing your limits," Reynolds said. "SEALs don't die easy, Mitchell. They survive impossible situations. They adapt. They overcome. So let's see what you're really made of." The instructor's grip tightened. Sarah's heart raced as she understood what was about to happen. The drop below wasn't straight down. It was a steep, rocky slope that would send anyone tumbling over boulders and through thorny brush. A fall like that could cause serious injury, broken bones, internal damage. It might even kill someone if they hit the wrong way. "Sir, this is insane," one of the trainees finally spoke up. His name was Martinez, and he had always been silent around Sarah, neither friendly nor hostile. "This isn't training. This is—" "Shut up, Martinez," Reynolds snapped, "unless you want to join her." Martinez fell silent, but Sarah saw the conflict in his face. Others looked away, unable or unwilling to meet her eyes. "Last chance to quit, Mitchell," Reynolds said softly, leaning close enough that only she could hear. "Walk away now. Go back to whatever desk job they'll give you. Forget this whole thing. No one will blame you." Sarah looked him straight in the eye. "No, sir." Reynolds straightened up. The smile was gone now, replaced by cold fury. "Then I guess you need to learn the hard way. SEALs don't die, Mitchell. Let's see if that applies to you." He nodded once. The instructors threw her over the edge. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. Even as she fell, even as the world spun around her, her mind stayed sharp. She twisted her body, trying to control the descent. The slope rushed up to meet her, and she hit hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Then she was rolling, tumbling down the rocky incline. Stones tore at her uniform. Branches whipped across her face. She tried to grab onto something, anything, to stop the fall, but the momentum was too great. Pain exploded in her ribs, her shoulder, her hip. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds, Sarah slammed into a larger boulder and came to a stop. She lay there, gasping for breath, her entire body screaming in agony. Above her, she could hear voices, Reynolds shouting orders, the sound of boots on rock. "Stay here," Reynolds commanded the group. "No one goes down. We give her 10 minutes. If she can't make it back up on her own, we'll call for a medical evac. That'll be the end of her career and good riddance." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting against the pain and the anger that threatened to overwhelm her. Every breath sent sharp pains through her chest. Her left arm wasn't responding properly, and she could feel blood trickling down the side of her face. But she was alive, and she was conscious, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and the shock, a fire began to burn. They had tried to break her. They had humiliated her, thrown her away like garbage, left her to die or crawl away in defeat. They had made a mistake. Sarah opened her eyes and looked up at the cliff. Through the haze of pain, she could see the silhouettes of the men above, watching her, waiting for her to fail. Sarah lay still for 30 seconds, taking inventory of her injuries. Her ribs were badly bruised, possibly cracked. Her left shoulder had taken a hard hit and felt partially dislocated. Blood ran from a gash above her eyebrow. Her hands were torn up from trying to grab onto rocks during the fall, but nothing felt broken beyond repair. Nothing that would stop her from standing. She thought about her father, a Marine who had died in Iraq when she was 15. She thought about the last thing he had said to her before his deployment. "Mitchell women don't stay down, Sarah. We get up. Every single time." Sarah rolled onto her side, biting back a scream as pain shot through her ribs. She pressed her right hand against the boulder and pushed herself to her knees. The world tilted dangerously, but she focused on her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, until the dizziness passed. Above her she heard Reynolds' voice. 5 minutes gone. Anyone want to bet she makes it back up? Laughter, they were actually laughing. Sarah's jaw clenched. She used the boulder to pull herself to her feet, swaying slightly as her battered body protested. The cliff face loomed above her, 40 feet of rock and dirt and everything that had tried to destroy her. But Sarah had grown up climbing. Her father had taken her to climbing gyms and outdoor crags from the time she was 8 years old. She knew rock. She understood how to read it, how to find the holds, how to move her body efficiently. She started climbing. Every movement was agony. Her left arm was weak, forcing her to rely more heavily on her right and her legs. The cuts on her hands burned as she gripped the rough stone. Blood from her forehead kept dripping into her eyes, blurring her vision. But she kept moving, one hold at a time, one foot placement at a time. "Sir, she's climbing," one of the instructors said above. His voice carried a note of surprise. "I can see that," Reynolds replied. His tone had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something harder. "Everyone stay back from the edge." Sarah found a small ledge and paused to catch her breath. She was about halfway up now. Her entire body shook with exhaustion and shock, but she forced herself to look up to find the next series of holds. She couldn't stop. If she stopped, she wouldn't start again. She thought about Maria's warning. Reynolds wanted to humiliate her, to make her a cautionary tale. Well, she would be a tale, just not the one he had planned. Sarah reached up, found a solid hold, and pulled herself higher. Her boot slipped on loose rock, and for a heart-stopping moment she dangled by one hand. Pain screamed through her injured shoulder, but she held on, found her footing again, and continued. Above her, the voices had gone silent. The laughter had stopped. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, could sense the shift in the atmosphere. They had expected her to fail. They had counted on it. And now they were watching something they hadn't anticipated. They were watching her refuse to break. With one final surge of effort, Sarah pulled herself over the edge of the cliff. She collapsed onto solid ground, her chest heaving, every muscle trembling. For a moment, she just lay there, tasting blood and dirt and victory. Then she stood up. The movement was slow, painful, but deliberate. Sarah rose to her feet and looked directly at Commander Reynolds. Blood ran down her face. Her uniform was torn and filthy. She swayed slightly, barely able to stand. But she was standing. 7 minutes, sir, she said, her voice hoarse but clear. I believe I beat your deadline. Reynolds stared at her, his face unreadable. Around him, the other instructors and trainees stood in stunned silence. Martinez's mouth was actually hanging open. Even the instructor who had shaken his head on Sarah's first day looked shocked. You're bleeding, Reynolds finally said. Yes, sir. You need medical attention. After we complete the exercise, sir. Sarah locked her knees to keep herself upright. She would not show weakness now. I believe we have 3 more checkpoints. Something flickered across Reynolds' face. For just a moment, Sarah thought she saw a flash of respect or perhaps fear, but it vanished quickly, replaced by his usual cold expression. You're done for today, he said. Martinez, escort her back to base for medical evaluation. I can complete the exercise, sir, Sarah insisted. That was an order, Lieutenant. Reynolds stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You proved your point, don't push your luck. It wasn't quite an admission of defeat, but it was something. Sarah nodded once, then allowed Martinez to support her as they walked away from the group. They had gone about 20 yards when Martinez finally spoke. I've never seen anything like that. Like what? Sarah asked, each step sending fresh waves of pain through her body. What you just did. What they did to you was wrong. Everyone knew it, but no one, he trailed off, shame evident in his voice. No one spoke up, Sarah finished for him. I wanted to, but Reynolds. I know. Sarah stopped walking and looked at Martinez. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't about just me. If I had let them break me today, it wouldn't just affect my career. It would affect every woman who comes after me. Reynolds and men like him would point to this day and say, see, we told you they couldn't handle it. Martinez nodded slowly. For what it's worth, you earned my respect today, and I think you earned theirs too, whether they admit it or not. Respect isn't given, Martinez, it's taken, and I'm not done taking yet. They continued back to the base in silence. Sarah knew that the medical evaluation would reveal the extent of her injuries: bruised ribs, partially separated shoulder, multiple contusions and lacerations. She would be on light duty for at least a week, maybe 2. But she had survived. More than that, she had climbed back from the place they had thrown her. She had looked death in the face and walked away. Sarah spent 3 days in the base hospital. The doctors confirmed her injuries: 3 cracked ribs, a grade 2 shoulder separation, a mild concussion, and enough cuts and bruises to make her look like she'd gone through a war zone. The official report listed it as a training accident. Sarah had lost her footing during a mountain exercise and fallen down a slope. No mention of being thrown. No mention of Reynolds' deliberate actions. Sarah didn't challenge the report. Not yet. She knew how the system worked. If she accused Reynolds directly, it would become her word against a decorated commander and his instructors. Without proof, without witnesses willing to speak up, she would be labeled as someone who couldn't handle the pressure, who blamed others for her own failures. So she waited. And while she waited, she watched. Maria Vasquez visited her every day in the hospital. On the third day, she brought someone with her, a man in civilian clothes who introduced himself as James Chen, an investigator with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. "I heard about your accident," Chen said, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Interesting how Commander Reynolds has had 3 other serious training accidents in the past 5 years, all involving trainees he didn't think belonged in the program." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Is that unusual?" "For most instructors, yes. For Reynolds." Chen pulled out a tablet and showed her a list of names and dates. 2 recruits washed out after their accidents, one with a broken leg, another with a severe back injury. The third died 6 months later, though officially it was ruled unrelated to the training. His name was Danny Park, a Korean-American kid who Reynolds had vocally opposed bringing into the program. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "You think Reynolds?" "I think Reynolds has been operating with impunity for too long," Chen interrupted. "But I can't prove anything. The accidents are always explained away. The other trainees never saw anything. The reports are clean." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. Maria answered, "Because you're still alive, Sarah, and because unlike the others, you didn't wash out. You climbed back up that cliff, and now everyone on that base knows what happened, even if they won't say it out loud." Chen leaned forward. "I need witnesses. I need someone who was there to come forward. Martinez seems like he might be sympathetic, and there were others who looked uncomfortable. If even one person confirms what really happened, I can open a formal investigation." Sarah thought about Martinez, about the shame in his voice when he admitted he should have spoken up. She thought about the other trainees, young men who had been taught that loyalty meant silence, even in the face of wrongdoing. "I'll talk to them," Sarah said. "Be careful," Chen warned. "Reynolds knows something is happening. He's been unusually quiet since your accident. That might mean he's backing off, or it might mean he's planning something worse." Over the next week, as Sarah recovered on light duty, she began reaching out to the other trainees. Most wouldn't talk to her. They avoided her eyes, made excuses, disappeared when she approached. The fear of Reynolds ran deep. He controlled their careers, their futures, everything they had worked for. But Martinez was different. Sarah found him one evening in the gym, working through a solitary workout routine. "I know why you're here," he said before she could speak. "The answer is yes." "Yes. Yes, I'll testify. I'll tell them what happened, what I saw." Martinez set down his weights and looked at her directly. "I've been carrying this around since that day, and it's eating me alive. What Reynolds did was criminal. If I stay silent, I'm part of it." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. When this comes out, my career is probably over. Reynolds has friends in high places. They'll make sure I pay for breaking the code." "The code?" Sarah's voice hardened. "There's no code that covers attempted murder, Martinez. That's what this was. He threw me off a cliff and hoped I'd either die or be too broken to continue. That's not training. That's not tradition. That's criminal." Martinez nodded. "You're right. I know you're right. He paused, struggling with the words. "I just need you to understand what this means. For you, this is about justice. For me, it's about losing everything I've worked for." "Then why do it?" "Because my little sister starts at Annapolis next year. She wants to be a Navy pilot, and I'll be damned if I let her enter a world where men like Reynolds get away with this kind of thing. If I don't stand up now, what right do I have to call myself her brother?" 2 days later, Martinez gave his statement to NCIS. Within hours, 3 more trainees came forward. They hadn't seen the actual throwing. Reynolds had made sure they were positioned where they couldn't. But they testified about the hostile environment, the pattern of psychological abuse, the things Reynolds had said about women in the military. Reynolds was suspended pending investigation. The news spread through the base like wildfire. Sarah heard the whispers, saw the looks, some supportive, many hostile. She was labeled a troublemaker, someone who couldn't handle the pressure and had destroyed a good man's career out of spite. But Sarah had expected that. She had prepared for it. What she hadn't prepared for was the call she received on the 8th day of her recovery. It was from Admiral Patricia Morrison, the highest-ranking woman in the Navy. "Lieutenant Mitchell, I'd like to speak with you about your training experience. In person. Can you be at my office tomorrow at 0900? Sarah's heart raced. "Yes, ma'am." "Good, and Mitchell, bring your documentation, all of it." Sarah spent that night organizing everything: medical reports, training logs, copies of Reynolds' written criticisms of her performance. She also wrote down everything she remembered from the day at Devil's Drop, every word Reynolds had said, every detail of what happened. The next morning, she arrived at Admiral Morrison's office exactly on time. To her surprise, she wasn't alone. James Chen was there, along with 2 other NCIS investigators and a Navy lawyer. Admiral Morrison gestured for Sarah to sit. The Admiral was in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had risen through the ranks at a time when women were barred from combat roles, fighting every step of the way. "Lieutenant Mitchell," the Admiral began, "what Commander Reynolds did to you was unconscionable. But before we proceed, I need you to understand something. This investigation will get ugly. Reynolds' supporters will come after you. They'll question your performance, your motives, your character. They'll paint you as someone who couldn't cut it and blamed your instructor." "I understand, ma'am," Sarah said. "I don't think you do, not fully." Admiral Morrison leaned forward. "See, Reynolds isn't just a commander, he's a symbol. He represents an old guard that believes women weaken the military. If we take him down, we're not just punishing one man. We're challenging an entire worldview, and that worldview has a lot of powerful defenders." Sarah met the Admiral's gaze steadily. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Granted." "Then with respect, I don't care about any of that. Reynolds tried to kill me. He's hurt others before me. And if we don't stop him now, he'll hurt someone else after me. My career, my reputation, those things matter, but they don't matter more than doing what's right." Admiral Morrison smiled, a small, fierce expression that reminded Sarah of a warrior preparing for battle. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear, Lieutenant, because I'm about to do something that will probably end my career too." She opened a file on her desk and slid it across to Sarah. Inside were dozens of documents, reports, complaints, incident records going back 15 years. "Reynolds has been doing this his entire career," Morrison explained. "The Navy has looked the other way because he produces results. His units are elite. His trainees are highly skilled. But he accomplishes that through terror and brutality, weeding out anyone he deems unworthy through methods that violate every regulation we have." "Why hasn't anyone stopped him before?" Sarah asked. "Because no one's been willing to fight the battle it would take. Until now." Morrison's eyes hardened. "With your permission, Lieutenant, I'm going to make your case the centerpiece of a formal investigation that will expose everything Reynolds has done. Not just to you, but to everyone. And I'm going to push for criminal charges." Sarah looked down at the file, at the names of all the people who had suffered under Reynolds' command. Some she recognized from obituaries and memorial services. Others had simply vanished from military service, their dreams crushed. The court-martial of Commander Jack Reynolds began 3 months later. It was held at Naval Base San Diego, in a courtroom packed with officers, trainees, and media. The Navy had tried to keep it quiet, but James Chen had leaked enough information to ensure public attention. Reynolds wasn't just being tried for what he did to Sarah. He was being tried for 2 decades of abuse, for creating a culture of cruelty that had destroyed countless careers and may have contributed to at least 2 deaths. Sarah sat in the witness section, wearing her dress uniform. Her injuries had healed, though her shoulder would never be quite the same. The physical scars would fade. The other scars, those would take longer. Martinez sat beside her, along with 5 other trainees who had agreed to testify. 3 former trainees, men who had washed out years ago, had flown in from across the country to tell their stories. And in a video deposition that brought tears to every eye in the courtroom, the widow of Danny Park described how her husband had changed after training with Reynolds, how he had become haunted and withdrawn, how he had died by suicide 6 months after washing out of the program. Reynolds sat at the defense table in his dress uniform, his face carved from stone. His lawyer was aggressive, attacking every witness, questioning their motives, suggesting they were simply bitter failures looking for someone to blame. When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed Navy captain named Willis, began with the basics: her background, her training, her assignment to Reynolds' unit. "Tell us about the day at Devil's Drop," Willis said. Sarah took a breath and told the story. Every detail, every word Reynolds had said. The feeling of being thrown, the fall, the climb back up. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. Reynolds' lawyer, a civilian defense attorney named Hackett, came at her hard during cross-examination. "Isn't it true, Lieutenant Mitchell, that you had expressed anxiety about mountain training prior to this exercise?" "No, sir, that's not true." "But you were nervous, weren't you, about being the first woman in this program?" "I was aware of the responsibility, yes, but I wasn't nervous about my abilities." "And when you fell, isn't it possible you simply lost your footing, that in your nervousness you made a mistake?" Sarah looked Hackett directly in the eye. "Sir, I didn't fall, I was thrown. By Commander Reynolds' direct order, 2 instructors grabbed me and threw me over that cliff." "You say thrown, but the instructors deny that. They say you were near the edge and you stumbled." "Then they're lying, sir." Hackett pounced. "So everyone who disagrees with your version of events is lying. The instructors are lying. Commander Reynolds is lying. Isn't it more likely, Lieutenant, that you misunderstood what happened? That in the confusion and fear of falling, you created a narrative that makes you the victim instead of accepting responsibility for your own mistake?" Sarah's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. "I know what happened to me. I know what I heard. And I know that Commander Reynolds has done this before to other trainees who he decided didn't belong." "Objection," Hackett said. "The witness is speculating about other incidents." "Sustained," the judge ruled. "Lieutenant Mitchell, please confine your testimony to your own experience." But the damage was done, or rather, the truth was out. Sarah's testimony, combined with Martinez's eyewitness account and the pattern of incidents revealed by Admiral Morrison's investigation, painted a clear picture of systematic abuse. The turning point came on the 3rd day of the trial. One of Reynolds' own instructors, the man with the scarred eyebrow who had shaken his head on Sarah's first day, took the stand. His name was Chief Petty Officer Robert Hayes, and he had served with Reynolds for 8 years. "Chief Hayes," Captain Willis began, "you were present at Devil's Drop on the day in question." "Yes, sir." "What did you see?" Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I saw Commander Reynolds order 2 instructors to grab Lieutenant Mitchell. I saw them position her at the edge of the cliff, and I saw them throw her over." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, but the chaos continued for several minutes. Reynolds' face had gone pale. His lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. Willis continued, "Chief Hayes, why didn't you report this immediately?" "Because I was a coward," Hayes said simply. "I told myself it was just tough training, that she needed to prove herself. But the truth is I was afraid of Reynolds, afraid of losing my position, afraid of being labeled weak for standing up for a woman." "And what changed?" Willis asked. Hayes looked across the courtroom at Sarah. "She did. She climbed back up that cliff with broken ribs and a separated shoulder. She didn't quit. She didn't complain, she just kept going. And I realized that if she could be that brave, the least I could do was tell the truth. The verdict came 2 days later. Commander Jack Reynolds was found guilty of assault, conduct unbecoming an officer, and violating multiple Navy regulations. He was sentenced to 5 years in military prison, reduction in rank to seaman recruit, and dishonorable discharge. But the consequences went far beyond Reynolds. The Navy launched a comprehensive review of special operations training protocols. Admiral Morrison used the case to push through reforms that mandated oversight, prohibited abusive training methods, and established clear channels for reporting misconduct. 3 months after the trial, Sarah received orders to report to a new assignment. She was being transferred to a special operations unit, not as a trainee, but as an instructor. Her job would be to develop training programs that built up warriors without breaking them, that tested limits without destroying souls. On her last day at Coronado, Sarah stood at the edge of Devil's Drop. It looked different now, smaller somehow, less imposing. She thought about the woman who had fallen from this cliff, broken and bleeding. She thought about the climb back up, every painful inch of it. "It's quite a view," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to find Admiral Morrison, dressed in civilian clothes. "Admiral, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to see it for myself, the place where everything changed." Morrison walked to the edge and looked down. "You know, there are a lot of people who think we made too much of what happened to you. They say one incident doesn't justify destroying a man's career and turning the Navy upside down. What do you think, ma'am?" "I think," Morrison paused, choosing her words carefully, "I think you changed the conversation. Before you, we could pretend the system worked. We could tell ourselves that anyone who couldn't handle the training wasn't tough enough. But you proved that strength isn't just about taking abuse. It's about standing up when everyone wants you to stay down." Sarah nodded. "I had helped Martinez, Chief Hayes, you." "Yes, but you went first. That's what matters. You walked back from the place they threw you and showed everyone that SEALs don't die, and neither do women who refuse to quit." They stood together in silence for a moment, looking out over the valley below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "What's next for you, Lieutenant?" Morrison asked. "Teaching others to climb," Sarah replied, "making sure no one else has to fall the way I did." "Good." Morrison turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Your new commanding officer specifically requested you for his team. He said he wanted someone who understood the difference between breaking people and building them. His name is Colonel Martinez. I think you've met." Sarah smiled, a real smile, the first in months. "Yes, ma'am, I've met him." After Morrison left, Sarah remained at the cliff's edge for a few more minutes. She thought about all the women who would come after her, who would face their own cliffs and their own commanders who wanted them to fail. Some would fall. Some would quit. But because of what happened here, because of the stand she took, maybe a few more would climb back up. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and salt from the ocean below. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered a promise to all of them, the ones who had fallen before, the ones who would come after.